Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to PTV World. You're watching Views on News with me, Tayyaba Nisar Khan. Today we're going to talk about a very significant topic, which of course is the midterm elections in the United States, where about 35 seats out of 100 seats are up in grabs in the Senate of the United States. And of course, in the House of Representatives, all 435 seats are up for grabs. And of course, a very, very difficult situation that we can see over here as well. The Republicans are winning by a margin right now. They have, out of a 218 majority in the House of Representatives, have already grabbed about 210 seats in the House of Representatives, in the Congress as they call it as well. On the contrary, the Senate is a bit different. It's a bit more peculiar because there's a balance going on over there. There's a 50-50% chance of both of them winning as well, the Democrats and the Republicans as well. Of course, the votes are still being counted. They're coming on the rolling basis as well. Three very, very important constituency states are also very important, which of course includes Arizona, Georgia, Nevada as well. Georgia's election result will of course come on December 6th. So this may go on till weeks and to ultimately find out who's going to win in the Senate and of course in the House of Representatives as well. But the Senate is a little more tricky over here right now. And of course, we know that the Republicans, there has been a red wave that many call, but of course, President Joe Biden termed it a Democratic win by saying that the red wave was not as forceful as we all thought it would be. And of course, Trump also said, the earlier ex-president Donald Trump had also stated that he was disappointed by these results as well, which is very, very interesting because of course many people were saying there would be a red wave coming on, but that really did not happen. Of course, we will be joined in studio and on Skype by our guests as well. We have been joined in studio by Dr. Shamsi, who is an expert, the Director CAS, Expert of Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We've also been joined on Skype by two very important guests. The first guest is Mr. Harley Schlanger, the political analyst and the Schiller Institute, from the Schiller Institute, I believe. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Germany. We will be having a lot of fun talking to you as well regarding the US state elections as well. And of course, the barrister Ammar Khushnood, who's a senior analyst, has also joined us on Skype. Thank you so much, Mr. Ammar, for joining us as well. Okay, let's talk to Dr. Zia first, of course. Very interesting take has been going on there. The red wave didn't happen as Biden called it as well. Of course, they are expected to win by a slim margin, the Republicans. 210 seats have been won and only 8 seats are left that they could win as well. How do you think this is going to look for the Democrats in the future?
Thank you very much. I think they are going to face a lot of difficulties in the governance, especially the economy and the Ukraine war. I think these two aspects Mr. Biden is going to face a lot of issues with in the Congress. Why? If you look back 2 years when Biden came into power, he came into power after controversial win, to which Trump has not accepted the results as of today. And he remains a big challenger. Why the red wave, as expected, has not really swept across is perhaps because Trump was the only one who was challenging Biden from his side, from the Republican side. I did not see any other Republican senior leadership which came forward to contest the sitting government of Biden, number one. Number two, Biden by and large is the most experienced politician of Democratic Party who has come into power. He has a vast experience, and as they say that he comes from the establishment. But his governance has really been very challenging and has not been up to the expectations of the Americans. In the post-COVID scenario, Americans expected that Biden will provide them with that experience that he has, some kind of relief as far as the economy is concerned and other affairs. However, Biden administration really failed in that.
Right.
And economy as is heading for is perhaps 2023 and 24 is going to be recession year. Why? Because of the Ukrainian war and the post-COVID scenario, the food security and energy security, not only for Europe but for Africa and Middle East is also a big challenge. And Biden has not been able to stop the war, which most analysts expected that could have been avoided. In my opinion, the Ukraine war, the ongoing Ukraine war, which is already in its 9th month, is the most unnecessary war of the 21st century. In fact, all wars are unnecessary, but this particular war could have been avoided through proactive diplomacy, and that too by the US president. But it appears as if he was one of the proponent to instigate Putin to go ahead and attack Ukraine. Mr. Putin had been warning the world and the Americans about Ukraine, that it is his red line, and that too since 2008. But the Americans kept on expanding the NATO
Right.
and the European Union.
Right. Okay. So let's come back on the US elections as well. Of course, very significant because there might be tax cuts on the Ukraine crisis as well, and America's involvement in the Ukrainian crisis. Of course, we know that there's a lot of military involvement of the US as well. They are supplying military weapons to the Ukrainians as well. But let's go on to Mr. Harley Schlanger, all the way from Schiller Institute in Germany. Of course, we know that economics are something very important. But of course, as Dr. Zia was talking about, the fact that there is a possibility of the 2024 elections going back to the Republicans. Do you see that happening?
Well, I think there are two lessons from the elections that just took place. One is that neither party is addressing the major issues that are concerning the American people. The American people are concerned with inflation and economy, and neither party has an answer to that, and I'll get back to that in a second. But the second thing is the Ukraine war. Both parties support the war. And so there is an opportunity for the Republicans to use the issue of $60 billion, American dollars, going to arm Ukraine, while American families are having trouble making ends meet. American servicemen can't feed their children, and they have to go on food stamps, government welfare. So the issues that are most in the front of the minds of people are war and the economy. And neither party had a strategy for that. This gets to the real problem in American politics. There's not much difference between the two parties. The Republicans say the Democrats are left socialists. The Democrats say the Republicans are right-wing extremists. But on major issues, they come right down the center, and that's the way the vote turned out. The question now is what will happen with the Senate, because if the White House will remain for 2 more years with the Democrats, if they control the Senate, nothing much will happen over the next 2 years. And I'm afraid that the other aspect of the election that just took place was it was somewhat hijacked by Donald Trump, saying that the real issue was that he won in 2020. That was the reason there was no red wave, because the Republicans were refighting the 2020 election. There's plenty of reasons to be opposed to Joe Biden, because of the economy, because of the war, because of the border. But the Republicans did a very poor job in drawing the distinctions. The American people wanted to see something. This was a very large turnout. But the fact that the Republicans did not make major gains, because the party out of power, out of the presidency, historically in the midterm elections makes major gains, that didn't happen this time. I think the Republicans will control the House by a small number. The Democrats, if they hold the election and win in Nevada and win in Arizona, they may have the same majority they had before, which is Kamala Harris, the vice president, with the deciding vote. So the election settled nothing, and it's because there was no real difference between the two parties.
Right, Mr. Schlanger, let's talk about the budget cuts as well. You've talked about the Ukraine crisis as well. Of course, there is a certain disagreement on that as well within the House, the Congress as well. There might be a possibility if Kevin McCarthy comes as a speaker, if the Republicans win the Congress vote as well in the majority of the Congress seats, then after he comes, there's a possibility of budget cuts as well. And do you think this could risk a possibility of a government shutdown in itself?
Well, McCarthy has said that the Republicans may oppose the blank check that Biden has given to Ukraine. But up to this point, 100 senators have voted with Biden on the Ukraine issue. and only a handful of Republican House members have opposed. So I'm not sure, unless there's a huge outcry from the population, I'm not sure that will happen. Now, the question of budget cuts, the Republicans do believe that the solution to the economy is to cut government spending. The problem is not government spending, it's that we've deindustrialized the United States over the last 30 years. So a large number of people are dependent on stocks and speculation to make money. And when you have a bubble economy, when the bubble pops, as it has popped now, everybody's hurting. This is the worst time to have budget cuts. The infrastructure is falling apart in the United States. People are having trouble paying health bills, medical bills, food bills, and so on. But the Republicans are a party of austerity, and they believe that the government is too big and out of control. My view is that the government is controlled by the wrong people. It's controlled by the corporations as opposed to an active American citizenry.
Right. Okay, let's go on. We will talk about the economic situation as well, but let's go on to Mr. Barrister Khushnood right now. There's a lot of talk about gerrymandering as well. There's a lot about talk about the redistricting as well. You're a barrister yourself. Do you think the Republican win could be accounted for the fact that there was redistricting and gerrymandering?
Well, I don't think it's a straight, clear Republican win. If you look at the seats in the House of Representatives as well as in the Senate, well, Senate is yet to be decided, but even if you look at the win in House of Representatives, it's not a lot. And as Donald Trump had said that there'd be a red wave, there was no red wave, unfortunately for him. And that is because they could not encash on the issues on which they could have fought this election to a red wave. The issues that were important to the Republicans at the moment were immigration, were crime, inflation, the biggest issue. The cost of living has gone really high in the US, and they could not encash on those issues. So I don't think, that's if you call it a win, well, it's not really, the red wave win that they wanted. Yes, if, they take over the Senate by, a one-seat majority, they might hang the agenda of President Biden, the legislative agenda of President Biden. But what has happened right now is that there's another issue which has, taken its course, and a lot of young people have gotten into it, which is the issue of reproductive health, or you would say, the abortion issue.
Abortion.
And yeah, so, due to the recent Supreme Court judgment in Roe versus Wade, so, that's caught up with people, and, people have really come out for that, especially the young ones. And they have voted for, as Mr. Schlanger said, that, the numbers are huge. Yes, they've voted in huge numbers. But this is one of the issues which the Democrats encashed on. I mean, and yes, there's a bill that is to go into the Senate for this, and that might hang for a while. But if you call it a win, I don't think so. Yes, House of Representatives, yes, okay, they have a few more seats. But ultimately, it comes to the Senate. That's where everything gets approved. That's where all the appointments get approved. So if the Democrats, by some margin, well, it'll probably be one seat if they take it. So if they can take the Senate, they can pass their bills, they can keep their appointments, they'll have less of a challenge there. But calling it a win and, doing all of that, redistributing the districts, I think that's not probably a very popular idea right now.
Right, Barrister Khushnood, absolutely. It's not a win right now. It's not a wave at all, because they have broken a lot of, the Democrats have broken a lot of Republican votes as well. Coming back to Dr. Zia, of course, there is a talk about inflation. You've mentioned yourself, Mr. Schlanger also mentioned it as well. Economic impact is very profound. The fact that the global recession is also causing a lot of recession in the United States, and it is very, very much pertinent as well, because it is coming. And also not just that, the cost of living has gone up high, also the recession, the inflation has gone up high, and people are really suffering the economic impacts as well. And there was a talk about taxing the rich by the Democrats as well. How do you think after these midterm elections it would look like for America's economic situation?
In fact, as the results are coming, and as we've discussed, the other two speakers also reinforced my point that the red wave that Trump expected did not come primarily because of the campaign issues. And secondly, as we know that the Americans always vote on issues, they do not vote on slogans. And the issues that have been mentioned by the barrister also, they were not rightly targeted during the campaign. And that is why the real gain could not be made by the Republicans. And in spite of poor governance by the Biden administration, it could not be capitalized by the Republicans. And it appears as if the next 2 years will not be that difficult for Biden as Republicans may have thought. However, that does not necessarily mean that the 2024 presidential elections will be safe for the Democrats, number one. Number two, economy has always remained a number one priority for a common American. If you recall during the Clinton campaign, I think there was a phrase used that keep it simple, stupid, it is economy. It is economy, is stupid, isn't it? So we need to understand that if a particular administration has failed to provide relief to a common American, it will not get votes. And that is what has happened here, and Democrats have been able to sustain some kind of voting pattern only because of the failure of Republicans who have not been able to capitalize on the weaknesses of Democrats.
Right. You just mentioned that it might be easier for Biden even if the Republicans win the majority in the Congress as well. But Biden has made some offensive strategies as well in terms of climate action, in terms of environmental legislature, also in terms of the pandemic infrastructural legislature as well. Do you think if the Republicans do end up winning the majority in the House of Representatives, there might be a backlash on the already made legislations on such issues?
Not really, because these issues affect a common American, and no party can afford to undo a legislation which is likely to be supported or be in support of a common American. So they may not be able to hurt him in that way, and they may not be able to block too much of his offensive actions that he has taken in the past 2 years. However, this Ukraine war support is going to hurt Biden administration because of the economic reasons, number one, and number two, the food security and energy security in Europe,
right,
North Africa and Middle East.
Right. Let's go to Mr. Schlanger now. Of course, the same question to you as well. Of course, there were some legislations such as the legislation on climate change. Of course, we know that Donald Trump, when he was the president, he pulled out of the Paris Agreement as well. And after Biden joined, he came back into the agreement as well. Do you think there will be certain action if the Republicans do come back with a majority in the House of Representatives regarding climate change issue?
Well, polls show that most Americans put climate way, way down on the list of concern. It comes out 2 or 3%. So I don't think people were voting for Biden because of his Green New Deal. In fact, the Green New Deal was supposed to be an infrastructure bill, but very little money went actually into infrastructure. On the economy, look, the problem is no one in either party has defined the real issue. The issue is not the corona crisis, it's not the Ukraine war. The economy was hit with massive inflationary tendencies back in 2019 when they bailed out the banks, a huge bailout, a flood of money from the Federal Reserve to the banks, which increased the money supply and increased the debt. And that's why we have inflation. Now, instead of addressing that, people are saying, well, we should cut government spending, people should spend less. Some Democrats say, well, we should give people another check or something. It doesn't work. You have to invest in the real economy. Now, this is where there's an opportunity. If any of the major leaders in either party has some sense of the world situation, there's a move globally away from the dollar system. This is what's going to affect the American people much more in the next 2 years than anything people are focused on now. This is what the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS, the Eurasian Economic Forum, this is what they're talking about. And the idea that, for example, the Saudis are taking Chinese currency for their oil, this is the shift that's underway. I see economically a big change in the United States where the American people are not going to be able to compete because we've shut down our industrial economy as part of the Green New Deal. If a Republican had the good sense to make this an issue, it would be a sweep in 2024. The problem is both parties are controlled by the money from the financial institutions, the insurance companies, the big banks, and so on, and they don't want that change.
Right. Thank you so much for answering that question, Mr. Schlanger. Let's go on to a break, a short break. We'll be right back with more on the midterm elections that are happening currently in the United States of America.
Tried so hard, so many times in the finals. This is their day, and just watch the celebration. One of the greatest in the game. Kumar Sangakkara finally gets his opportunity under the lights here at Mirpur in Dhaka.
Game on hai.
Welcome back to Views on News. Now let's go back to Mr. Schlanger because he was talking to us regarding the policy as well. Now, Mr. Schlanger, we know that the Republicans have 210 seats right now, as mentioned so many times on this show as well. But if they do win, right now we've seen that Biden had a very offensive strategy regarding the sweeping of bills in the Congress as well. Do you think he's going to go on a defensive?
The Republicans do control the House. That means they have an ability to block whatever Biden tries to do. And the Republicans have made it clear that not only are they going to do that, but they're talking about impeaching him. You know, this is where you see the silliness of American politics, that revenge for the Democrats impeaching Trump is what's driving some of the Republicans, not the hardships that American people are facing. So I think if the Republicans have a majority in the House, and the House is where the budget bills are started, that they will be able to tie up President Biden's agenda. The question is, what's his agenda? If he had a real agenda to address the problems people are facing, he could go directly to the people and get the bills passed. The same way, that's what Ronald Reagan did. That's what Bill Clinton did. The best presidents, Franklin Roosevelt did that, went to the people with fireside chats, radio, and a real campaign. No one is doing that right now. And so as a result, people don't know about the tremendous changes in the world going on. And I mentioned this before, the end of the unipolar order, where the United States can dictate policies to every country, can use the International Monetary Fund to literally loot countries. That era is over. Countries around the world are saying no more. This is going to have a profound effect on the American economy. And American people don't know it at all because the media doesn't cover it. The politicians don't talk about it. And the Schiller Institute and my organization are out front raising this issue, and we're growing in strength, but it's not enough.
Right, Mr. Schlanger, we will definitely come back on the legislative investigations that might be carried if the Republicans come. But let's go to Barrister Khushnood now. Of course, we talked about the abortion rights earlier on as well, and Kentucky is one of the states that's not accepting the constitutional amendment that has been made on Roe v. Wade as well. Do you think issues such as abortion rights and possibly the cultural wars that are disseminating amongst the Americans as well, do you think, and of course Black Lives Matter and so many others, do you think they're one of the reasons why Democrats were able to break the vote of Republicans?
Well, to be honest, there are a lot of states which are rigid in their approach, if you call it rigid. It's difficult to change them. They have, people of a certain thinking, and they believe in it strongly. I mean, if you talk about Black Lives Matter, I was in the U.S. during the last presidential election, and I saw not the protests, but the aftermath of the protests, and then the election followed by the Black Lives Matter protests. And I also saw how, people were handed out money by the U.S. government. And things in the U.S. probably don't work like they would work in Pakistan and, maybe in Europe or other countries in the world. So there are issues. Now, who's backing which issue and how popular is that issue? It all depends on, when, for example, Kentucky would have a different opinion, whereas Illinois will have a different opinion on something, and so on and so forth. So, issues, as I said earlier, there were issues. Immigration was an issue, and Donald Trump, as we all saw, he brought things on air, and he stopped immigration, tried to stop immigration, I would say, wasn't very successful. So, and then there's the issue of, crime rate as well. That's been increasing in certain states. So, but these issues, as we saw in this election, they really couldn't do much. President Biden, despite the fact that his popularity has been, less than 50%, or approval rating, say, has been less than 50%. And despite all of that, despite his approval rating being down, the Republicans really couldn't make a real dent. As I said earlier, there was no red wave. Everyone in the Republicans was expecting there'd probably be a red wave due to the lack of a clear policy, as Mr. Schlanger said, by President Biden. But there has been nothing concrete, especially the economy, because people have been suffering. The petrol prices, energy prices, groceries have gone up, everything's gone expensive. Inflation has really hit the people. But despite high inflation, the Republicans could not get those results as were expected because, they could not emphasize more, despite the fact they are being heard. They could not emphasize to the people, to the voters, that, this is an issue that they can bring something, some change about. For example, Donald Trump, he was the person, who went out to companies and asked them to set up in the U.S. after a long time. As Mr. Schlanger said, they have deindustrialized the U.S. That's what the U.S. needs to do. And Donald Trump did work on it. He did try to bring things, back to the way they were, not on such a scale, but, as much as he could. And despite that, despite people knowing that, this is what he's going to do, there was not much of an effect. There was no dent in the vote bank. If we look in the House of Representatives, for example, as you were, we were talking earlier, the voting issues. Now, the members will vote according to the issue. It's not necessary that the whole party goes and votes, for Republicans or for Democrats on, one certain issue. Some of the representatives may not favor one issue. Some may do, So it really depends from issue to issue as far as legislation is concerned. But these issues could have been capitalized on by the Republicans. Unfortunately, they could not stress more upon.
Right, of course. Now let's go to Dr. Zia. We know that Republicans have their own agenda as well. Mr. Khushnood, Barrister Khushnood, talk about immigration policy as well. They are trying to bring in more border security, law enforcement legislation as well. Do you think that there will be a possible cooperation between the Democrats and the Republicans?
That is possible. But the issue we must understand is that nothing affects Americans more than the economy itself. And why Biden has been able to avert a disaster in these elections is primarily because of Republicans' own doing. Poor campaign planning, not striking at the weak points of the Democrats, not being able to convince the voters, their own voters, to look at the governance performance of the past 2 years of the Biden administration. In fact, we need to understand it is not the American economy which has suffered. It is the world economy which is going to hit the recession next year and year after. China, just look at China, how quietly it is heading to become the world's largest economy by 2028, isn't it? And somebody talked about the currency swap as well. That is so much is happening around in the world. Why? Because people are seeing Americans falling. They're falling behind only because of their aggressive and offensive policies related to war. We have still not forgotten the hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan, that they stayed there for 2 decades and yet handed over the power to same people who they had ousted some 2 decades ago.
Right. Dr. Zia, do you think that any government that is, of course, any Republicans or Democrats, whoever win this midterm elections, do you think they'll be able to consolidate their economy?
I don't think so. It can happen so quickly. We'll have to wait for next presidential election, in fact. That is going to decide how America will shape itself in the coming decade. Why? Because China is going to leave them behind very soon. And Americans will continue to rely on their military strength, which obviously is the history's best ever military ever shaped up. And that is why they think that having wars across the globe really supports their military industrial complex, and that is what drives their economy. Because whatever they spend on military spendings anywhere in the world, 90% comes back to their own companies and within their economy. That is what they think. But it does not support a common American. They need to look into humanomics, that is, they invest into their humans.
Yes, but of course we know that US is basically staunch in its idea of capitalism as well, because there is not much social capitalism over there that is followed. Now let's go to Mr. Harley Schlanger. Of course, he talked about the possible impeachment of President Biden as well by the Republicans if they come into power as well. There are a lot of issues that Republicans raised that they might go into scrutiny for and then investigate, such as Hunter Biden, his son's involvement in the Afghanistan, and of course his business in Afghanistan as well. Do you think that, number one, how do you think Democrats are going to counter that? And number two, do you think that this is going to affect the future 2024 presidential election as well?
Well, let me just start by saying I completely agree with what the speaker before me just said, that the U.S. unipolar system is what's falling apart. And it's falling apart worldwide, and countries are moving away from it. Now, why did Trump win in 2016? Because he said he was going to end the wars. He was going to become friends with Russia. This could have been a strategy in this election. Now, when you look at the question of Hunter Biden, what's the issue there? The underlying issue is Ukraine. Joe Biden was the point man for the Obama administration when he was vice president for Ukraine. And the U.S. funded the 2014 coup that threw out a democratically elected president, Yanukovych, and brought in the present regime. Biden is tied to this Ukrainian regime. The Democrats don't want the Hunter Biden question to come up because Hunter's corruption was his involvement with the Ukrainian oil company. But just to finish this point on the Republicans, I think that this idea of the United States ending the role as the policeman of the world, which has enormous financial costs and austerity for the social costs, that's the way we have to break out of this. We have to stop being the policeman and work for a multilateral cooperative world order, as opposed to one where the United States says there's only one model and it's our model. And we see now the BRICS with Algeria wanting to join, the Saudis wanting to join, the BRICS being Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Even during the Imran Khan administration, there was talk about Pakistan joining the BRICS. This is the future of the world economy, moving away from one size fits all. And as I'm saying, if anybody would start educating the American people about that, any candidate, it would transform the political environment in the country.
Right, of course, but we do know that midterm elections are not only significant for the foreign policy as well, but also for their own economic and all internal policies as well. There is the border issue with Mexico as well, and there are so many other issues as well that we need to also realize and significantly talk about as well. Let's go to Barrister Khushnood now. Of course, there's a sort of a different question from you as well. We know that there is one representative, a Gen Z representative, who's at the age of 25, he was able to win the election of a state as well. And of course, we know that millennials account for only 6% in the House of Representatives. Meanwhile, most of the others are over the age of 50 or 45 for that matter. Do you think, is there a possibility that if this new, for instance, Gen Z person has come in and elected, is there a possibility for a change of policy, a more inclusive policy, not just in terms of age, but also in other matters which are important for the young population of America to come up?
Well, Tayyaba, let's be honest, you know, the over 50s that you talked about, they have more experience than the ones that have just, you know, entered the House. So it might, you know, they might be influential, but I think it might take them some time, you know, because there's a lot more than just getting elected to have an effect on something. And, you know, adding to the points that the earlier speaker said, there's one thing that we need to understand about the U.S. The U.S. economy runs on consumerism, you know, and we said, you know, about the polarization of the world powers. But one thing we need to look into is that if you look into China's trade with the world, U.S. is its biggest buyer. So if U.S. goes out of the equation, where do you see China going? You know, where do you see the other economies going? So if you put all the other economies in the world on one side, and you put the U.S. economy, because there's huge consumerism there. So that's probably, you know, what needs to be looked at. You know, U.S. cannot be neglected. It cannot be, you know, rooted out from the you know, this world politics. It is there. It might go a little low, but it'll stay there, especially because of its consumerism.
Right, Barrister Khushnood. But do you think that the young population is rising in America?
The young population has always been rising. But do you see any difference in the U.S. from what it was 50 years ago and what it is today? The U.S. population, the Americans, as they call it, they have a certain mindset on certain issues. And it's very difficult to change that. You know, they like to have big-sized burgers. You probably don't see those burgers anywhere in the world. They like to have tall drinks. So, you know, they're thinking, yes, the young population is a bit different, but not a lot different, you know. The thinking is still the same. They have, it'll take some time, you know.
Absolutely.
To be honest, yes, there has been some change because of the new social media thing, the new social media waves, but no, it's not a major change.
Right, it will take some time, but we are really hopeful that the young population is going to rise and bring up the issues that actually affect a lot of majority of the population of the entire world, which of course is the youth as well. We'll be right back after a short break.
巴基斯坦和中国命运共同体。 中巴友谊比山高，比海深，比蜜甜。铁杆兄弟之间的伙伴关系，建立在70年的友谊之上。在习近平主席“一带一路”倡议下，中巴经济走廊建设步入高潮，改变着人民的命运。在首席部长夏巴兹谢里夫的领导下，取得了历史性成就。撒希瓦尔燃煤电站项目、巴哈瓦尔布尔太阳能光伏电站、拉合尔轨道交通城线列车首次运行。巴基斯坦首列全电气化地铁列车获得了夏巴兹速度、旁遮普速度称号。作为总理，带领巴基斯坦经济复苏，与中巴经济走廊复兴。
时隔4年，首次召开联合合作委员会会议。下一阶段建设包括工业、铁路、公路、能源基础设施，
建设瓜达尔港为下一个贸易和转运中心。习近平主席邀请夏巴兹谢里夫总理出席上海合作峰会。
We shall not waste a moment to further cement our friendship, our brotherhood. It is easier said than done, but Chinese model we have to emulate, and with your support, and we want to work hard, and we want to stand on our feet one day soon with your support.
中巴伙伴关系是时候更上一层楼了。2022年11月，总理访华，下一代的未来就在此刻。习近平主席第3次当选中共中央总书记。巴基斯坦总理代表巴基斯坦全国人民祝贺习近平主席第3次当选中共中央总书记，向他英明的领导能力和为中国人民服务的
Welcome back to Views on News. We're discussing the midterm elections, which of course the counting is still being counted in the United States of America. The last election will take place on December the 6th, which is going to be on the state of Georgia, which is going to be the deciding factor for the Senate elections as well. Let's go to Dr. Zia. Dr. Zia, of course, we know climate is a very, very significant topic. Immigration is one of the very significant topics as well, which are being raised by the Democrats themselves. Of course, we know that there are big corporations and big industries that are one of the major contributing factors to the climate issue as well. Do you think that coming of the Republicans in the majority, that is 218, if they come to win, that is, it's going to affect these policies?
Not really. Because climate has not figured out in American politics as it has elsewhere, although they are the largest contributors. Only because American economy strives and thrives on wars. And if you are manufacturing the war material, you are hardly caring for climate.
Right, but there are a lot of internal voices that are rising on climate.
There will always be. There will always be, because there are always pressure groups. There is civil society in United States which is very vibrant, and they keep raising the voice. But it is the decision makers who do not give any heed to these slogans or these call for, which are universal actually. They do not even recognize it as their own problem.
Right.
Because it does not affect only them, it affects the whole world. And that is why the whole world is crying.
Right.
But it is famous for Americans that they don't care.
Right. Let's go on to Mr. Harley Schlanger now. Of course, we know that Georgia is going to take place. The last election, it's December 6th, and the counting is going to take place as well. The balance of power could be affected by Georgia in itself. What is your take on the situation of Georgia and the other states being important, such as Michigan, New York, and others?
Whole election came down to the runoff in Georgia, where the Democrats took 2 seats, and that gave them the majority. The Democrats are trying to hold on to one of those seats, with Senator Warnock running against a football player, Herschel Walker, who's supported by Donald Trump. Now, the question will probably come down to turnout, and it's interesting because both of the candidates are African American.
Right.
So it becomes an extremely interesting question because Georgia, as a southern state, and I lived in Georgia for a number of years, Georgia had an endemic problem of racism. That seems to have changed. And your point about younger voters, there are things changing in the United States. The problem is that it's always focused inward, with very little concern for the rest of the world. And the younger people know very little about the rest of the world. I know this from the classes I give all the time. People don't know they couldn't find Pakistan on a map, many of them. So this is a significant problem with the American electorate. And instead of trying to uplift people, raise their understanding, politicians treat them as simple people who will respond to slogans. Now, the Georgia election, I think all eyes will be on it. It looks as though whoever wins Georgia will control the Senate.
We're really glad, Mr. Schlanger, that you're there to teach the children where the map of Pakistan is and the rest of the world as well. Thank you for that. But let's go to Barrister Khushnood now. What do you think is going to be the future of democracy? In very brief words, we're out of time almost.
Future of democracy where? In the U.S.?
In the U.S., after the midterm elections.
Well, it is going to stay. It's not going anywhere. I don't think it's going anywhere. But see, the midterm elections, these elections take place every 2 years. But when they happen, in the middle of the presidential term, they're called midterm elections. And what people want to see is what's the effect that they're going to have on the next presidential election. So the next presidential election is in 2024. I don't think, the Republicans have been able to make an impact to say, that there'll be something big or a big change happening in the 2024 presidential election. I think they're far off from that at the moment.
Right, that's an interesting take. Thank you so much for joining us, Barrister Ammar Khushnood, Mr. Harley Schlanger, who will tell his children and the students as well that where Pakistan lies as well, and Dr. Shamsi, thank you so much for joining us in the studio as well. We know that the midterm elections in the United States of America are happening. 435 seats are for grabs, 210 won by the Republicans. If 218 are won by, then they will be in the majority, and McCarthy might come as the new House Speaker instead of Nancy Pelosi. Then let's see and watch what happens. The Senate is in the balance right now, but the time will tell what really happens. Thank you for joining us on Views on News with Tayyaba Nisar Khan.